Hey, everybody, Tina Campbell, the New York Regional Partner of Master Networks. We're doing a lunch and learn today, as we've been doing with many of our members, and that is to help entrepreneurs and the business people to really grow and to keep growing and to pivot during this time. And I'm hoping that it really goes beyond when this is over, that these really are timely. So today I'm really excited because I have a friend, Joe Marra, and he's going to be talking about, I believe, the some of the legal ramifications that are coming through right now. Is that correct, Joe?
Yes, Tina, we're going to be talking about the Payroll Protection Plan and
Great,
its effects on business and how we can utilize it to help our businesses.
great. Can you tell us about yourself?
Surely. Tina, I'm an attorney. I've been a practicing attorney since 1984 when I was admitted to the bar. My undergraduate degree was in accounting, and I also have a second law degree, an advanced law degree in taxation. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I started off as an accountant. I worked in a Big Eight, at that time, Big Eight, now Big Four accounting firm, Price Waterhouse. Interned for them, interned for a couple of other firms, and then decided to go to law school, worked for law firms while I was in law school. And out of law school, I joined the Bronx District Attorney's Office. But I wasn't happy there. So I went to Deloitte Haskins and Sells into their tax department where they hire attorneys. And that's where I got my LLM in tax. And then after a while, wasn't happy there and bounced around a little more. And then in 1988, I opened my own practice. And I've been in practice ever since. Right now, there's 8 of us, including me in the firm. And like all of you out there, this program is something that I need, that we all need. And I did the research to find out what it's about, and I thought it might be a good idea to share it with you. So
Excellent.
what I'm going to do is share my screen with you folks. There's an outline here, and we can kind of go through it together. All
Great.
right, so here we go.
And I'll just ask you questions if there's anything I don't understand.
Absolutely. Are you seeing the outline, Tina?
Yep.
Okay. So this is all part of the Payroll Protection Plan is part of the CARES Act. Okay. And the CARES Act is this big stimulus package that was enacted on March 27, 2020. Now today is April 22nd, and many of you may be asking, well, why do I care? Because the money ran out, which it did. All right. The plan was enacted March 27. The whole purpose of it was to assist small business owners. $349 billion went through in less than a week. But as of today, as of last night, the 21st, the Senate has passed a bill to add another at least $300 billion to this program. When will it be enacted? We don't know. There's haggling between the House, the Senate, and the White House, but there will be more money. So why should you be concerned about this? Because you really need to get your application in, get in line, get in the queue, because there's going to be another rush when this money is available, and you need to be in a position where you can take advantage of it. And
Quick
I'm here to
question.
help you do that. Sure.
Quick question with that. So what you're saying is that you can actually put your application in now for the next round?
Exactly. Let me
Uh,
give you a little background. The program is basically there. Well, let's talk about the CARE Acts in general. There are 4 basic programs. There's the Payroll Protection Program. All right. Then there's this Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which has been a program that's existed for years, administered by the SBA. Normally you hear about it, hurricanes, earthquakes, things of that nature for small businesses. But they expanded the definition to include coronavirus. So that's just an expansion of a pre-existing program. 2 other new programs, there are small business tax provisions and small business debt relief program, but as you'll see, they're really not worth pursuing at this point. The major program is the Payroll Protection Program. Okay, so what's the purpose of the program? Let's start there. Purpose is to have employers keep their people on salary. That's what we want. That's what the government wants. They want people on salary. That was the whole purpose of this thing. Now, Congress passed the legislation and then passed it along to the Small Business Administration, the SBA, to administer it. The government is funding the money, but you don't apply directly to the SBA. You apply through a local lending institution as part of the program. okay? What they're supposed to do is gather the information and pass it along to the SBA, and then they get funded by the government when they give you the money, all right? And it's been a problem for the banks. The banks, took a long, it usually takes them months to implement these type of things. They've been asked to do it in weeks. Another problem has been that Congress passed this large hundreds of page legislation and then gave it to the SBA sometimes without some directions. So the banks would go back to the SBA and what do we do? And the SBA has no answers. So what I'm telling you now, depending on what goes through with the next legislation, some of it could change, but I think the basics of the program are going to remain the same. So as I said, the program is going to be retroactive, I didn't say this yet, to February 15th. And what are they going to do? Well, they're going to take what's called an average monthly payroll. And that's a specifically defined term. We'll get into that in a minute. They're going to take your average monthly payroll, multiply it by 2.5 times, and that's the amount of your loan, okay? Now, as I say here, you can file it through the bank's website. The thing that's great about this, the banks don't require a lot of information. There's not a lot of stuff you have to provide them with. And the funds are 100% federally guaranteed. So the banks are not on the hook for this. Actually, our grandchildren are, because the government's going to be borrowing money to fund this. But the banks, they just are the conduit. And I know we're all kind of ticked off at our bankers. I know I am. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you really can't fault the banks. This is just a crazy thing they're trying to do in a short period of time. All right. So who's eligible? That's the first thing. One thing I'm hearing from a lot of people, which is a fallacy. Well, you know what? I was talking to someone today. Well, I don't have a lot of employees, so I'm not eligible. Well, yes, you are. Initially, it was thought that you weren't eligible, and that's where people may think that they weren't, but in fact, they are. The government expanded the definition to include independent contractors and, more importantly, people who may be a partner or an owner of an S Corp or an member of a limited liability company, people who are getting draws. So those draws are included as part of your calculation, all right? So you might think you're not eligible, but you probably are. So the forms of entities, sole proprietors, independent contractors, partnership, limited liability companies, it's also available to certain nonprofits, all right? Size limits, 500 employees, but 500 employees per physical location. I'm sure you've heard of some people that ticked off that companies like Shake Shack and Ruth's Chris got this money, because that was one of the things that was snuck in the bill. So if you have this 500 people in location, you were eligible for it. So people are not too happy about that. I think that's going to change on the next round. Now, what's the amount of the loan? Well, there's a formula. As I said, 250% of your average monthly payroll costs. I'm using the 2019 calendar year. The Act has some different language, but people are basically using that. If you're not in existence the whole time, there's other formulas, other ways of doing that. But for most businesses that are in existence 2019, use that calendar year, okay? There's a formula. The maximum amount of the loan is 10 million bucks, no matter what you use, that's the maximum, okay? Now, what's included in the formula? Compensation, salary. What do you pay your employees? Also, payments as corporation shareholders. It's included. Your draw. If you're an independent contractor, what you're getting 1099s from people. That's included. Okay? If you're paying vacation time, sick leave, medical leave, severance, it's all included. Group health insurance benefits. The employees portion of federal income tax. So what's not included is what the employer pays, the FICA basically, your Social Security contribution, your unemployment contribution, that's not part of the calculation. But what the employee pays in is. Same thing with state and local payroll taxes, federal, employer and employee. What's not included? Very important. They cap the salaries at $100,000. So basically, if someone's making $175,000, you take $75,000 off when you're doing this calculation, all right? Also, if you're the person issuing a 1099, well, that's not included. That makes sense because the 1099 people are eligible. So if you're issuing a 1099, you don't include the 1099s you issued in your calculation of payroll, right? It only relates to people if you have some, like I know some people are hiring remote workers who are outside the United States. Those people not included. You have to be only employees in the United States, all right? Now, sick leave, there's other things. So you take this aggregate cost. So you add all these things up, subtract out the salaries for people over, over 100,000 in wages, all right? You multiply it by, you take the average, multiply it by 12. Divide it by 12, take your annual total, divide it by 12, come up with an average. So aggregate payroll, subtract out people over 100,000, what they have earned over 100. So if they earned 175, you pull out 75. Take that aggregate, multiply it by, divide it by 12. You get your monthly amount. Then you multiply that monthly amount by 2.5, and that's it. Now, we talked about those SBA disaster loans. If there's an advance we'll talk about in a minute, if you got your advance, you got to subtract that out because that would be double dipping, all right? Now, what is this for? You have to use the money over an 8-week period, all right? It's 8 weeks. You have to spend it. And you can qualify for loan forgiveness, all right? How do you qualify for loan forgiveness? Well, at least 75% has to be used for this payroll. And that includes all the things that we talked about before, including sick leave, health insurance, all right? 75% has to be that payroll number. The other part, the other 25%, you can use to pay rent, pay utilities. Doesn't include internet and cell phone. You see I have a question mark there. I'm going to take it out because that's been qualified to answer yes. It does include internet, cell phone use if that's a major part of your business. If it's not, obviously it doesn't. If you have interest on debt that existed on February 15th, that's included. You can pay that debt, okay? Now this last one, G here, number 6, it says if you furloughed employees, bring them back by April 26th. Not sure if that's valid anymore. That's something that's still kind of percolating because they're going to factor in when they determine whether or not you're going to forgive the loan. They're going to look at number 1, what did you use the loan for? And they're going to look at how many employees did you have and how many employees did you pay. So they're going to actually penalize you if you don't have the same number of employees you had when you started this thing. All right, on February 15th, I believe is the date. So that's a factor. We don't know how that's all going to play out. But one thing I recommend for this, when you get the money, put it in a separate account and then make these payments that you know are going to be deductible out of that account. Is that required? No. But is it going to be easier to account for it? Yes. Another recommendation is have your accountant do the calculation. Don't you do it, all right? One thing, if you don't have a payroll service, I use ADP. They have reports already prepared to submit with your application. But here's the downside of that. I submitted my loan and I get an email, first a call from my loan rep, my commercial banker, and he says, well, Joe, they're only basically going to offer you 2/3 of what you're asking for because they only have documentation for that. I'm like, well, that's just an ADP payroll report. I also submitted all my health insurance invoices. I submitted my dental insurance invoices. I submitted 401k contributions, which by the way are also the safe harbor part that you contribute for your employees. That's also included in the calculation, right? So all those costs. So now I had to explain that to them, all right? So it is a little bit of a problem. If you're paying these things, it gets complicated. And that's one of the things that's been holding up the pipeline because the people who process these things don't understand. Right. They don't understand what's going on, right? Now, what if the loan is not forgiven? Well, it's still a pretty good deal, okay? Term is 2 years. Supposedly they're going to defer interest for 6 months. They were talking about possibly up to 4%, but now I've heard it's 1%, right? And there's a 6 months deferral of interest, as we just said. Now, you can also apply for other SBA loans, but you can't double dip. So if you get another SBA loan, you can't use the funds for the same purposes you're using the PPP, right? But you can get an SBA loan. Documentation is not that onerous. There's an application. You get your payroll records, like I told you, ADP, your payroll tax filings, and the supporting documentation that you have to show your retirement contributions, your health insurance contributions. That's it. It's not a lot of stuff. It's pretty good. As I said, get your application to your banker as soon as possible. Some people may ask, well, my bank doesn't take it. go online. There's a company called Cabbage. They give money to, it's like an extra loan, like higher interest rate type loan company. They're taking them. They're not giving any higher interest rate loans, but they're trying to generate business by acting as a conduit to place your loan. There's a couple of others, and I'm blanking out on the names. I'm sorry, but there are others. If you go to the SBA's website, they have a list of lenders. So does an article by Forbes, has other lenders too that's not necessarily in the SBA website, so you could find them.
And I just wanted to interject that well, there's a bunch of bankers in Master Networks that have been working tirelessly with our members to try to get these through, and they're happy to speak with them.
That's great. It's great to keep it within the network, and you know you're going to get good service from people
Yeah.
in the network.
Okay.
And they're going to push your loan through. Because I personally, I applied with Chase. I got mine in 3 days before, 3 days after the program went live. And I got a confirmation from Chase on April 7th that they got my application. I didn't get funded. Why? They were dealing with their bigger company, bigger clients. I got an email 2 days ago, which I was telling you about, because that's when getting ready for the second round. I also applied with 2 other companies, and one of them, they screwed up the application so bad, I just withdrew it. And the other one now just got back to me, is doing the same thing that Chase did about, oh, you know, we can only give you X, you're asking for Y, you know. So
Let me know if you need a referral.
yeah, thank you. But I want to keep these 2 in the pipeline. I don't think I'm going to do any more.
Yep.
Because I think you know, some people say, oh, you can't do 2. Well, and some people, I've heard some people from SBA representatives saying this. I disagree, and here's why. Just don't take 2 loans. When you get your first loan, immediately withdraw your application on the second. You could file as many as you want. Just don't take the money, because if you do, guess what? They're going to come looking for you.
Right.
Right? Now, we'll talk briefly about these other parts of the program, the economic injury disaster loan, okay, and the grant. As I said, the economic injury disaster loan was applied to normal disasters, Hurricane Sandy, cyclones, whatever. That was up to $2 million, but the paperwork is onerous. The government wants security. You're not applying through a bank, you're applying directly through the SBA. What I've heard is that, oh, they were going to give you up to $2 million. Well, now they cut that down to $15,000. Is that accurate or not? I don't know. But that's what I've heard. So I don't know if you want to put in all these paperwork just to get $15,000. Now, the other thing is they said they were going to give you an advance of $10,000 as a grant. And they want to get that money out right away. So I immediately put in my application. Once again, put it in, I think, on the 6th, and it was part of the application. Never heard back. I then heard that they were only going to advance $1,000 per employee up to 10 employees for a maximum of $10,000. So I don't know if they require you to continue and file the application, which I didn't do, but I've never gotten that money. But still, that application just to get started, to get the grant is it's relatively quick. You could probably do it 10 minutes if you know what you're doing, and half an hour if you have to fumble through it. I would do that too. Will you get the money? Who knows? But it's worth the time to put it in. That's the EDL loan and the EDL grant, same thing. These 2 other programs, well, here's a comparison chart I have in my outline. You could see what the purposes are for the 2 loans. Basically, look at the terms. Payback protection up to 10 years, up to 10 million, 1% interest rate. The EDL, you have to put a lot more information to them, and you only can get maximum of 2 million. The interest rates are comparatively different. Is it forgivable? Well, the PPP is, the EIDL is not, except the grant part is. But by the way, if you get a grant on the, I think I said this before, if you get a grant on the EIDL, you have to subtract that from your PPP if you get a PPP money. If not, it'd be double dipping, and the government will come after you with handcuffs. So you can see the interest rate comparison, the terms of payment, and so on. Right? Small business tax provisions, anybody's ever interested about that, yeah, I'll talk, but don't bother. They're really not, I don't know what the purpose of them was unless they modify them now, but don't bother. And that's basically it. Tina, you have any questions you think people might want?
Um,
Want answered?
I so just want to for EIDL, I mean, there's 2 parts to it. There's a loan and there's a grant.
Correct.
You have to apply for, can you just apply for the grant?
Well, that's a good question. I put my application in just for the grant. am I going to get the, I didn't file the application for the loan. It's very onerous. And like I said, especially when I heard they were cutting down the amount you can get, I didn't think it was worth it.
The amount
So
you get for the grant, like the amount you could get for the grant is how much based on what?
up to 10,000 max,
Mhm.
1,000 per employee. You can include yourself. So if you're solopreneur, it's only $1,000, right?
Right.
Uh, if you have a company, like I have 7 people, so I'm hoping to get 7,000.
Got it.
So, you know, will I don't know. I mean, I thought I had heard, oh, they want to pump this money out quick, like they did with the stimulus checks for people,
Yeah.
most of whom have already gotten them. They want to get the money out quick. Well, they haven't gotten it done. I haven't heard anybody got the grant money yet.
Yeah.
So
That- okay, that's
it's
interesting.
crazy.
No, this is great. You know what's really, I've heard several, iterations of this whole conversation. And seriously, I'm not just saying this, but it was really interesting because you went through it. The other people that I heard people talking about it was like, okay, you do this, you do that, you do this, and it wasn't like what was real life, So
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much for having me, Tina.
Yeah. So can you just unshare for a minute, and we'll just
Sure.
go side by side, and we're going to put information to have contact you down below in the description of our video. So you'll be getting me some information on that. And so people cannot just explain to me. People, if they want to talk about this, they can call you. But what other of the law practice? Just tell me quick. If somebody has another issue, tell me about your law practice.
Well, a lot of what we do, about 40 to 45% of the practice, involves estates and estate planning, will drafting, trust drafting, administering estates. So that's a big part of the practice. As a matter of fact, Tina, I'm just finishing up an ebook on estate planning in the time of COVID. A lot of people think they can't get anything done. That's not true. And if you want to do another one of these sessions, I'll do that on estate planning.
Wow. Wow.
So I'll send you the ebook when it's done.
That would be great. And yes, because we would want to add that link to this at some
Okay.
point, even after the fact, after
Yeah.
this comes out. But
We
so go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We also do real estate, residential,
Mhm.
commercial, transactional real estate. Um, we do matrimonial. I'd say about 25% is matrimonial and divorce. And for me, that's for 2 reasons, particularly, I don't want to say easy, but somewhat easy, because it's financial. I have an accounting background. And also a lot of matrimonial attorneys, and my due respects to the matrimonial bar and the people who are listening to this, they get very litigious and they threaten you that you're going to go to trial. And I always smile because I've tried a lot of cases. I've tried cases that have been in the paper, and most matrimonial attorneys never tried their way out of a paper bag. So I'm like, okay, let's go to trial. That would be fun. I'll enjoy that. So that's another part of the practice. And bottom line is, if it's something we don't do, I have a network of people that if you can't find someone in this network, I could certainly find someone for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that's the one thing, if anything that I've heard, like all the testimonials about you and all the things that, our discussions, is that you definitely like a challenge.
Absolutely.
Okay. And some of the stories, as though, you never give out the first people's names, but the stories are very interesting and very wide variety. Let's
Well,
put it
Tina,
that
I want to write a book because there's so much that's gone on,
way. Yeah, you
There
should.
was one case I tried in the late 90s, early 2000s. I had a lot of these cases. I got a lot of referrals about priests and religious people accused of malfeasance. And as I said, my original background was as a prosecutor, and I tried one criminal case, white Irish Marra's brother. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of like the male equivalent of a nun, accused of raping an 11-year-old girl who was a student at a school in the South Bronx. I was able to get him acquitted, I think rightfully so. And that was one of the most challenging things I ever did in my life,
Yeah.
and learned a lot out of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what it's all about, right? It's about learning and moving forward. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on and doing this with me, and for, just supporting the rest of the members and beyond, just the people in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina, for having me.
Great.